Thanks for joining us this evening. My name's Renee Skaggs, and I'm the Farm Planning and Agricultural Assistance Program Director at the Pierce Conservation District. I'm going to put up a couple slides here in a minute on what we do. One of those things is to host workshops. We'll either be the speakers at a lot of them. We do a lot of farm tours, and we're going to do some virtual farm tours this spring and summer. But we also love to have guest speakers. Joe and I did a presentation or teamed up. I didn't do anything. I just did the organizing last year on this topic. But he's been working with Maynard Maloney for a couple of years now on growing alternative forages. So we wanted to bring that presentation to you tonight. So Joe Harrison is WSU Extension's Dairy and Nutrient Management Specialist. He's on here to kind of run interference if there's some technical things that Maynard or myself can't answer, and he's always a great resource for nutrient management for your livestock. Okay, Joe, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Yeah, this is the second year we've done this. Actually, last year we did a combination of live and by Zoom, and that was just prior to everything becoming Zoom for everyone's life. So, and that seemed to go pretty well. So we decided to go ahead and try that this year again. I'd had contact with Maynard last fall. I can't remember the original reason, but anyhow, he was updating me on the work he'd been doing with his pastures and so forth. And I thought, well, this might be a good opportunity to kind of do a phase 2 of an effort on alternative forages. And so Maynard said, yeah, he'd be real interested in doing that. I first began working with Maynard about 20 years ago, back in the early 2000s, after the dairies in our state began to implement nutrient management plans. And they were interested in looking at different rates of manure application and applying manure actually late into the fall and early into the winter, because they were using really low rates. So we did some studies looking at nitrogen uptake and crop growth and so forth, but we also looked at implications on runoff of nutrients and bacterial runoff and surface water at their locations. So yeah, that goes back about 20 years. And then there is a NRCS practice standard, or a practice, I don't know if you can call it practice standard, maybe Marty can help out, but it's a winter manure application that was based off of the work we actually ran at Maynard's. And it's pretty restrictive, but that was a result of work that was done there at Maloney's farm. So they've been able to contribute to guidance that comes out of NRCS as well. So what we've got is Maynard has I'll let him give a little bit of his background. He's a WSU grad. So I'll kick it off with that. And then we'll pull up a PowerPoint that he sent to me, and I'll run that from here. He's got some issues with bandwidth down where he's at in rural Chehalis area. And then at the end of his presentation, we have a video that I'll play, and Maynard will narrate that. So you'll actually be able to get to see quite a few of the practices putting the forage in the ground. So Maynard, turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'll just introduce myself. Thanks, Joe and Renee, for allowing me to do this. I just like to help my fellow farmers out, and grow more crops off less land. So I am a third generation organic valley dairy producer. I live in the Boisfort Valley, which is down by Chehalis. We milk about 50 to 60 cows robotically. I raise 100% of my forages, so I am do not bring in any forages for my cows or my heifers. And being as I'm organic, I'm required to pasture a certain amount of time, but I do pasture my cows 200 plus days with 82% of their dry matter intake coming from pasture. So I'm out there usually April through October. Strip grazing, I use strip grazing is the way that I graze, and we will talk about that more. So Joe, if you could show the first slide, that would be great.
And then you can just tell me when to move to the next slide.
Yep.
Okay.
So what we're, yep. So what we are going to try to accomplish today is how to get more from less in using forage management practices. So my belief is I own about 200 acres of ground that I run forages on. And I don't want to go rent more ground when I can get better production off the ground that I have by just being more biologically friendly to the soil. I mean, I'm an organic farmer, so I can't use, nitrogen inputs, synthetic inputs, Roundup, any sprays of that. So I have to do everything the way Mother Nature intended. Who you see there is my daughter, Emily. In her left hand is a red top turnip. In her right hand is what is called T-Raptor. So that is a rape turnip cross. Those were planted on June the 5th. And the picture here is my first crop was taken on July about the 15th. So that's how big those grew in about 45 days. That's a crop we're going to talk about, considered a brassica. Those leaves are probably 8 inches across, and those plants are probably over 2 feet tall. Next slide, Joe, please. Okay, the topics we are going to talk about today, we're going to cover a little bit of forage selection, some tillage methods, a little bit on irrigation, some grazing management, some soil amendments, and some soil testing. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to, I believe you raise your hand by, is it star 9, Renee? Is that correct? Or just raise your hand some way?
Yeah, or just unmute yourself and jump in. That's fine.
Okay.
Or save it till the end, or put them in the chat. Any way, any of you want to.
Yeah, feel free at any time if anybody has a question to just jump in, because that kind of makes for more me not being so bored. Okay, Joe. So forage selection. So the one thing we're going to talk about right now is brassicas. So brassicas are considered like kale, cabbages, rapes, and now we're starting to see a bunch of cross breeds with those to make like the one on the big leafed one is I talked about. It's called T-Raptor. So it is actually a cross with a turnip and rape, and what that does is gives you a great big leafy, highly digestible, carbohydrate loaded, sugar charged for your animals, that grows in the summertime when it's really hot. When your grasses are slowing down, you can interseed these to help your cows out, or your animals out, or whatever animals you have, so that you're actually extending your season with these. And the pictures of the bags show you, the one is T-Raptor, the other one is Ford Feast, which is chicory. So one of the other things that I put in a bunch of my stands is chicory and plantain. And the good thing about chicory and plantain is they have anthelmintic properties. So if your animals are seeing worms of any kind, chicory and plantain will help to lower those levels. So these brassicas, you would plant those in like June. I think excuse me, the soil temperature has to be, I think it's 60 degrees for these to germinate. So you need to make sure that the soil temperature is above 60. And you put these in there, and then you'll leave them about 45 days, and you'll have 2 feet of nice lush green forage to harvest. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions?
So are you overseeding these into an existing pasture stand?
I have done both. So I have used the no-till drill and no-tilled them into some pastures. I've also worked up some small, usually on my property, I try small scale, like a research test plot. I'll work up like a 2-acre field, and what I'm trying to get rid of is the old Kentucky 31 fescue. So I'll work that up, and I'll use like these brassicas to smother those out, because they'll wipe out any weed, anything in your field. If you want to clean it up, plant these, and there's nothing going to compete. It's all, they're going to take over the field. And I've done both. Okay, Joe, let's go to the. Okay, so on forage selection, the pictures here. So that's a pasture. You guys can see the pasture stick. What that is stuck into is Italian ryegrass. So Italian ryegrass, if you plant that in the spring, you'll get a really good crop. Probably, if you irrigated 3 to 4 cuttings of 2 feet of ryegrass, high protein, high fiber grass, and then it will vernalize in the winter, and think the next year that it wants to go to seed, or it will want to go to seed. So then you'll get a huge crop. It'll just grow like crazy. So the forages that I have selected, if you're selecting a forage, you don't want to do monoculture, which is growing one specific variety in one field. You want to have, I say, at least 7 different species, including grasses, legumes, forbs, herbs, different types of stuff in there, and then find out what grows best on your farm, and then find out what grows best in different parts of your farm. And so you can select the ryegrasses, you can select orchard grasses. There's different varieties of fescue now that are highly palatable, high in fiber. You can put in some white clover, perennial clover. You can put in clover that's annual clover, like Balanza or Berseem. That'll give you a huge crop 1 year, maybe 2 years. And then if you allow them to seed themselves, they can continue. Red clover is a biannual, so that'll give you 2 years. And then I like to sprinkle in the chicory, the plantain, or different things like that. So on the ryegrass, you can put an annual ryegrass, usually in the fall. No-till that right in your field. It'll give you a crop early when it's moist and dry in the spring, and it'll be gone basically the next year when it gets warm. If you use Italian ryegrass, that'll give you a couple years of rye. If you're using the orchard grass, takes longer. So as Renee just mentioned earlier, she tried some fescue. The fescue is the same way. If you no-till it in the fall, you'll see a little bit of it the next year, but you won't see the biggest crop for about two years. Is there anybody have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay, so when you're thinking about overseeding, this may be dumb, but I'm just going to ask anyway. So overseeding and putting some of these grasses in, and you're just strip grazing through them, and like the orchard grass, it still has its mature crop 2 years in, or do you have to really leave it alone? Sorry, I'm not super great at
No. So you just have to be careful that when you're grazing, you'll see the new seeds coming up. And so if you don't want to graze, the grazing height has to be over probably 6 to 8 inches, because you don't want the cows to reach down and actually pull those new seeds out. So you actually have to have a little bit longer time on the paddock or on the strip graze or whatever, and leave that height a little bit higher. Okay. So rule of thumb is take half, leave half, but don't go below 6 inches or so.
Okay, thank you.
And actually that will help your ground maintain soil moisture also. And so you just have slow down the rotation or speed up the rotation according to forage height.
Thanks.
Yep. So one of the things on forage selection, and I actually read this and wrote it down. But if we optimize existing forage resources, we do that by managing diverse mixes for optimum production for whatever your particular need is for your particular field. So what we're doing is we're actually adding the forages in whatever diverse way you want to for whatever production role that you want on your fields. And a good way to start this is there's a free app called the Web Soil Survey. So you can go on there, download it on your iPad or your cell phone or your computer, and actually look up your farm, and it'll give you a free soil survey of what kind of soil is on your farm. So you'll know all the, what the water holding capacity, if it's sandy, if it's clay, all that stuff, and that will actually help to get you started. Okay, Joe, let's go to the next one. Unless anybody else has a question. Oh,
Hi, I did have sorry.
Go ahead.
I did have a quick question. Is this all for cows, basically, that we're talking about, or?
No. So basically, if anything that you're foraging, you just want to set up your forage resources for if it's a sheep, if it's a pig, if it's a cow, a llama, whatever. You just want to look up the forages that best suit that animal on your farm under your particular conditions. Because the good thing about forage farming is it's not specific to a farm. Like there's no rule that if I suggested something tonight, it's not going to work on everybody's farm.
Right.
It's how you design your own biological system to work within your soil, with your animals, with your knowledge to make that work.
Okay, thank you.
And Renee, I saw there was a couple of chat questions. Can you?
Oh, it was just a question. What was the name of that app? So Web Soil Survey, and Cassie put the link in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a little bit planting time on how I do it on my farm. So if you're working up a field conventionally, like plowing, disking, all that stuff, the best time to plant that is in the fall. And so my grandfather always told me to never ever work up a field and try to plant that in the spring, because your chances of that surviving were not very good. And so I've always went with that, and I've tried it in the spring, and my chances weren't very good. If you do have irrigation, you can do some work and plant in like June and have pretty good success. You just have to, time your irrigation correctly. And if we are adding like biennials, like turnips, brassicas, etc., again, that soil has to be 60 degrees for those to germinate and grow. So you're talking, May, I said April, but April, May, June in there. And then if you do have water, you can, irrigate those to help those things grow better.
Maynard,
Yes.
question, how deep do you measure that soil temperature? Are you measuring it right at the surface or a couple inches down? So that's 60 degrees.
I don't know, what would Marty suggest? Probably the depth at which the seed will be planted, correct?
Correct.
So these small seeds, so the brassica seeds are very small. There's usually, I think, between 12,000 and 15,000 seeds per pound. They're very tiny. You only need to plant 2 to 3 pounds per acre. And the joke is, if you plant them at the right time of year, for every seed that you plant, two will sprout. So sometimes less is better than more with these things, because they're super tiny and they germinate super fast and usually have a high germination rate. So if you put them out there, you can get a big coverage from a small amount of very tiny seeds. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, Joe, let's go to the next one. Okay, tillage. So being as I'm a organic farmer, I can't use, Roundup to kill everything off, to till any type of, herbicides or anything like that. So if I'm trying to kill, say I have a field of Kentucky 31 fescue, and I'm trying to kill that Kentucky 31 fescue off, what I will do is I will usually take a crop off, the like early crop off. And then when it starts drying up and getting hot out, I will take like an offset disc and disc the top of that off, the top couple inches off. So virtually peel the vegetative layer with a little bit of roots off, get that to flip up in the sun and dry out. And then go in and, maybe disc that one more time. And then depending on the depth of roots that I have, I may plow that under, or I may chisel plow that up and try to get that root mass to tip over deep enough that it will not grow anymore. And then I will go in with a finished disc, make a nice seed bed. And so when I make a seed bed, I will, and after you make a seed bed, you always pack that back down to compact the soil bound to make a nice, tight, finely disked seed bed. And then you seed, depending on the conditions and the depth recommended by the manufacturer of the seed on depths. Your grasses are an inch, maybe. A bunch of the smaller clovers, brassicas, stuff like that, you're only going a 1/4 inch. So if you're doing those, I usually just spin those on with a spin spreader, and I actually use a little like yard garden fertilizer spreader behind my 4-wheeler, and then I will pack those in with like a cultimulcher. Questions, anyone?
We do
I
have a
saw,
question in the chat, Maynard. I'm not sure if you can see those.
well,
Scott's asking, will this method kill Kentucky bluegrass or quack grass that is rhizomatous? Nothing seems to take these grasses out.
well, in my, I don't know, just my opinion, if you can kill Kentucky 31 fescue by doing this, most things, if you flip those rhizomes up and let them dry in the sun, you're going to get a pretty good kill. It might take a little bit longer, but I don't know, because I don't. I don't kill 100% of the Kentucky 31 fescue. There's still seeds in the ground. There's still some few rhizomes you get. If you really want to kill it off, what you would do is you would till it up as mentioned, and then I would go in and put a crop of say the T Raptor, 100% of that, and just let it smother that out all summer long. So plant, work it up in May, plant that crop, let your brassicas come in, your turnip, a brassica, a T Raptor, something that's going to grow way faster than grass, and smother that out to zero. And then go in the fall, and you don't even have to rework the field. If you have the seed bed that you want, just go in and no-till in whatever type of forages you want. Some type of grass mix with a legume mix with some forbs and herbs mixed in there.
All right,
And
Scott says thanks.
So the worst thing you can do is fail, because it's on the, like I said earlier, all you can do is try, and it's really great when you succeed. But I've failed a few times, and you just start over. Okay, so cover crops. Did we skip one, Joe? Or did I skip one? Okay, tillage. Okay, now we're going to talk about. Okay, now we're going to talk about no-till. So, Renee, did you guys have a no-till drill available through your conservation district?
Yep, we have a 606 NT available, and it is rolls out, starting whenever anybody's ready for it. You can sign up for that at our website and watch the video on how to use it and take the test, and then work with Allie Nichols in our office to schedule it getting delivered to your farm in Pierce County, that is.
So how big of a tractor does it take to
I believe it takes a 40 horse.
Okay.
I'll check out while you're talking. I'll look on our website right quick to check that.
Okay, so if anybody has never used a no-till drill, the no-till drill is probably one of the best things that a forage farmer can use. It's an exceptional tool to allow you to put in forages through a pre-existing stand. You can put in the newer seed varieties that are higher in carbohydrates, higher in sugar, higher in digestible fiber. You can add clovers, legumes. You can add forbs. You can add herbs. Just by adding a few $100s. I mean, it's really expensive, really easy to do. The best time of year to do it, in my opinion, is to do it in the fall. So the grasses that you're competing against have kind of went to sleep. Put in those new seeds when they start growing in the spring. Let them compete, and do the best they can. But if you do have water or irrigation, you can put certain crops in the spring. If you're doing like Italian rye, you want to do that in the spring. You can do some triticales, you can, you know, you can do ryegrass, you can do all types of stuff to, you know, with the no-till drill. So virtually you're just like, you know, you have less soil disturbance. You don't have to use a tractor to plow and, you know, disc and you know, go all through that. Anyway, are there any questions about the no-till drilling?
Yeah, so Maynard, down here under cons, you have less weed control. Okay, I understand that. And then can not destroy compaction. You want to explain that?
Okay, yeah, well, basically, if your field is compacted from, you know, heavy traffic use of animals, the only way to actually really reduce compaction is to bust the crust on that soil. But also, and I'm trying it this year, you can put in a brassica called a daikon radish, or what they're calling like a ground-breaking radish. So it's virtually a deep tap-rooted radish, which can lay out a taproot up to 3 feet in the ground, which helps, you know, get rid of soil compaction. And I'm going to try that in the no-till method to see if I can actually put that through some pretty dense sod to see if that radish can grow and bust up that compaction. But if not, then the only way to break up ground compaction, Joe, is to you know, plow that up and probably put a subsoiler in there to break that compaction zone up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so cover crops are crops that you plant. You know, if you have some ground that's bare in the fall that you wanted to work up, you know, went through summer, you know, wanted to kill off that, you know, Kentucky 31 or that Kentucky bluegrass, like was mentioned, and you planted you know, a crop to kill that off. You get to fall and you want to use you know, some type of cover crop, and you want to stop, you know, erosion, and you want to, you know, keep the nutrients back in the soil, you know, like a green plow down crop or something like that. So you can use triticale is really popular. Some people use barley, some people use wheat, some people use a clover like crimson clover or balanza clover, or something that's going to bring you back a bunch of nitrogen. You know, basically free nitrogen, because those crops are going to, you know, sequester that nitrogen from their own self. So you can go in the spring, harvest those crops off, either, you know, with animals or with machinery, and then come back with a no-till drill and drill right, you know, right through the residue. And once that crop dies off, it'll put those nutrients back in the soil, and when you put your new crop in there, you'll be ready to go. Are there any questions? Okay, soil amendments. So on my farm, I take an annual soil test according to my manure management. I have to take a fall soil sample for nitrogen, phosphorus, all that stuff. But I also, from the WSU pasture calendar, learned that on an annual basis, grass, in order to photosynthesize correctly, needs 20 pounds of elemental sulfur. Well, sulfur is a water soluble amendment, so every year it goes away. So I use gypsum on an annual basis. We'll spread that on my soil, so I actually get pelletized gypsum, and add between 200 and 250 pounds per acre. And gypsum is, I believe it's 18% sulfur. So that's going to give me my, 20 pounds on a minimum of elemental sulfur to add to my soil, so that grass photosynthesizes better, and starts it going. So I actually will put that on before, if you time it right before we get between 175 and 200 heat units in the soil, which this year was in about, and most years is about the second week of February. So when we get that really nice weather in February, you want to be out there with your spreader putting on that 200 to 250 pounds of gypsum, so it gets worked into the root zone. So as soon as that grass set and those legumes say it's time to grow, they're gonna suck up that sulfur and your field will turn bright green. The price for that, it's about $400 a ton. But for that ton rate, you're gonna do 8 to 10 acres. So it's between $40 to $60 per acre to do that. And being as I'm an organic farmer, I don't really use any other soil amendments other than lime. I do lime every now and then, but as far as like bringing in, synthetic nitrogen or phosphorus, anything like that, all I use is the manure that's generated off of my dairy.
Hey Maynard, we have a question from Catherine. She's wondering, how long are you keeping your animals off after you apply the gypsum?
Well, my animals are in the barn at that time of year, so I do not know if there's a rule as far as your cows are on the gypsum, but I don't believe. I'm not going to say anything. If anybody else knows something, please help. That's a good question, and I do not know the answer.
Keep going. I'll Google it.
I thought you gave a real good answer, is that your animals were still in the barn where they should be at the beginning of February. That way you minimize compaction on the fields.
How long after you've applied that gypsum, Maynard, do the cows usually see pasture though?
So if I applied in February, usually they're out by April. So I'd be out for 45 days, 45 to 60 days before the animals are out there.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's generally worked. The pelletized stuff takes a little longer than if you're using flowers. It spreads easier, but it's usually worked in the soil within like 21 days, depending on rainfall and stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's talk about soil testing. So I highly recommend, highly recommend. I have to every year because of my manure. I'm a dairy. I'm required by the state to take a fall nitrogen test. But I would recommend everybody to test their soil so you know what you're dealing with as far as what amendments you need to add to your soil. you know, as far as like the pH, do you need lime? Do you need nitrogen? You know, what's your calcium, the phosphorus ratio? What's your organic matter? And, you know, what's your CEC, which is, you know, tells you kind of about your soil fertility. Sorry. You know, and organic matter is a great measure of how much carbon your grass or, you know, your ground is actually sequestering from the environment. You know, it's also a great thing about how much water you can retain, how fast your ground's going to dry out if you have a drought. And it can also lead to, you know, free nitrogen from the breakdown of organic matter by mineralization. You know, gives you nitrogen. So Joe, did you help me out on any of this soil testing stuff?
Yeah, so depending on the questions we have, I pulled up a couple of soil test bulletins, so we can cover that at the end. If people have got some questions, we can try to address that. So,
I mean, I just say the best on soil testing is that, you know, get your soil tested and talk to an agronomist that can help you out and give you, you know, suggestions on what's best for your soil and your farm because like I said, every farm's not the same, every management isn't the same, but a really good management tool you can have in your toolbox is your soil test, to measure how your farm is doing on a year-to-year basis. I mean, is your pH getting better? Is your organic matter, are you increasing your organic matter? Are you adding enough legumes in your pastures that you don't need to buy nitrogen because you can get free nitrogen you know, basically by planting legumes. So basically, you know, if you properly manage your legumes, in having 30 to 50% of them in your pasture by weight, you can virtually get that should give you enough nitrogen where you actually don't have to purchase or, you know, buy any off-farm nitrogen. So you can balance your own nitrogen on your farm by just planting legumes that'll fix nitrogen from the environment. Okay, let's talk about some irrigation for those of us that have it. So back in the day, big guns were quite popular. A lot of people have them or still have, you know, had them or still have them. They have become unpopular for irrigation because they're highly inefficient. They compact your fields really bad just because of the way that they irrigate with very, very large droplets. So a lot of people are actually moving away from the use of big guns other than to just spread their manure effluent. Another popular one is irrigation hand lines, which are highly labor. You know, you have to go out there and move those things once or twice a day. They're pretty efficient. And, you know, a lot of people just don't like the labor to have to go and move those things every day. The new one is K-lines, which the K-lines are the little pods, which have the sprinkler inside of them. A lot of the sprinklers are rotators, which are the most efficient irrigation nozzle you can get. They're put on 50-foot spacings, and you move those with a four-wheeler or some type of motorized vehicle. The good thing about K-lines, and on my farm, I'll give you an example. I got a grant through my Lewis County Conservation District and through the Washington Conservation Commission to change my entire operation over to K-line or K-pods and away from hand lines because of the efficiency and leaving more water in the river. So I'm actually using less water and watering my fields better and moving those with a four-wheeler. So I would highly recommend if anybody is thinking about any type of irrigation upgrade or looking at them, to talk to your local conservation district, number one, and see if there's any type of grant opportunities. And number two, look at the K-pods, because they're my farm in just 1 year of converting over to the K-pods, I probably had or saw a 30% increase in forage production. But you know, in the end, you know, just choose the best option for your farm, and just keep an open mind as to what you know, the options are out there. Anybody have questions about irrigation? Okay, so grazing management. So first we're going to talk about the brassicas that I talked about earlier. So as you saw the picture of my daughter in the beginning, those really nice 2 foot tall by 8 inches wide leaves, full of carbohydrates, full of sugar, full of water. Those can actually be like putting dynamite into a cow's digestive system. We need to control the intake of those and probably only allow a ruminant or any type of animal to be on those for a maximum of 2 hours. You need to strip them off to limit the access, because they're going to go out there and they're going to eat those things like like crazy. They're going to eat, and the rumens will get very large, because they tend to, they will not bloat, but they'll just get full of gas because they tend to react very fast, the sugars and the carbohydrates. So on my farm, what I'll do is I'll graze them for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and then I'll move them to a field of some really good grass, so they'll want to eat the grass, and or put them into the barn and give them some dry hay to slow down the rumen process. Okay, and on my farm, can we move to the next one? On my farm, I use strip grazing. So what strip grazing is, I assess the field that I'm in according to height, you know, forage availability, and I'll measure out X amount of feet of that, allow my cows access, and then visually look at that after a certain amount of time if they've grazed, and say, you know, do I need to move that fence again? Have I taken half, left half? You know, have I not let it get below 6 inches tall? You know, do I need to move faster? Do I need to move slower? And all that goes into my mind, thinking that, you know, how much do I need to give the next strip? And then as you get through the season, your, like later in the summer, your strips get bigger because obviously there's less grass, bigger. So you're going, you know, you're taking bigger sections, but you're also trying to slow down the time between. So you want to be off of that field, you know, 21 to 28 days, to allow that grass and the legumes and the forbs to grow before you're back into that field. So you have to make sure that your rotation stretches out, shorter in the spring, longer in the fall, and then keep, the grass so the palatability is good. In mine, I can look at the milk tank and the cows will tell me if I'm, grazing that properly.
How quick are your rotations in the spring? Are you doing like 12 hours? I mean, not the brassicas, obviously, but your grass pastures.
In the spring, I try to go through them, smaller and faster. So I might move my fence 3 times a day, 4 times a day sometimes. So I'll put them in there knowing that it's higher, a little bit higher, growing faster. So I might move that fence every 8 hours, or I might move it every 6 hours. And if it gets too tall, obviously you fence it off, and if you can't do it, you harvest it mechanically.
Yeah, so you're running through and pre-clipping some of these?
No, I don't pre-clip.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, what about if they get ahead of you? Do you ever have that situation?
Well, yeah, I have certain fields that I graze. I graze in certain fields that I cut. I'll take the first cutting off of, because I know I'm never going to get there. And generally the rule of thumb is I use about 1,000 square feet per cow per day. So if I'm running 50 cows, I'm going through an acre of grass every day is what I need for my cows to get the level that I want. So I kind of adjust that number. I'm going to need 1 acre every day to maintain what I need. So I have to adjust what I cut to make sure that I don't short myself, because I'd rather be too long on my grazing and leaving it a little bit higher than getting it too low and slowing down the process later on in the grazing season. Did that make sense?
Thank you. Yep.
So virtually the worst thing you can do is eat it too low. I mean, if you allow those cows to take that off, too low, and we're starting to use satellite imaging with infrared pictures to better manage our grazing grounds, and Organic Valley as a co-op is I think this year is going to allow us to sign up. It's like $2 an acre to sign up our ground. So when the satellite comes over, it can take a picture, takes a thermal imaging picture, and you never want your ground to get to the red level, which means that the reflection of the sun is beating off of the dirt, heating that soil up, and you're losing valuable soil moisture, but also valuable growing time with your grass.
I think you can do that with what are those things called?
Well, some people have drones that have that.
Yeah, drones. Yeah, drones have thermal imaging. Some of them.
If you buy if some people have a thermal imaging drone, you can do that, and you just have to kind of know how to read what that thing's going to show you. But it's really great technology that's just come out in the past like 3 years. But there's actually and it's actually through Pioneer. So Pioneer has a satellite, and you sign up through Pioneer. When it flies over your farm, it'll send to your computer, whatever day of the week it is, X amount of photos that it took of your farm that are thermal images of your farm. And if you know how to read it, it can actually tell you the forage height that's in that field. And I think, was it Kevin that was on here? Who was I talking to earlier? Kevin, was that you? And there's a farmer down in Oregon that's actually done this on his farm already.
That sounds like a great workshop to have.
Yeah, it's really like state of the art, brand new ways of managing your property. Does anyone else have any questions?
I've got a question for you. Do you have any problems with elk or deer getting into all those lovely brassicas you're growing out there?
Yeah, unfortunately, the brassicas attract those animals. Yes, they do. They they love brassicas, and I know why people put them in deer and elk and animal attracting food plots.
So do you just accept that they're going to eat a certain amount out there, or is there anything you can do to discourage them?
You just discourage them by looking at them, tell them they might get into your freezer come the right time of year called hunting season.
Yeah, that doesn't work with the deer in my yard, unfortunately.
And no, Marty, I don't know how you can discourage them. They really like the brassicas. It really attracted them.
All right, so do we want to go on to Maynard's video, or should I have 1 or 2 slides of all the PCD services I wanted to show everybody before everyone ran off.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do the video.
Okay.
Get it pulled up here. Hang on a second. So Maynard, you're going to talk through this, right? As it's showing.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay. All right. Let me get my screen shared here, and okay. So I can't necessarily see what you guys are seeing, so I'm going to go ahead and click share. Just let me know if it's working okay.
Okay, so that's just the no-till drill in action. Virtually, I'm putting Italian ryegrass into an established stand of. I already have. This shows me spreading the gypsum the first week of February. And here are the brassicas in the ground as I took this video last week. So these have survived all winter since last June the 5th when I planted them. So you can see them commingled amongst the ryegrass. Here's my cows eating some nice juicy brassicas and grass and clovers. This is a picture of my K-line. Here's another picture of the brassicas, kind of up close. You can see the grasses mixed in with them. A bulb or two every now from some turnips. Again, here you can see the difference in the strip. So the strip to the left is where I was, where the cows are. Obviously, some pretty good pasture as far as height.
And those hills in the distance are where the elk are.
My son took this, so he is feeding this little calf in the hutch, actually one of the brassica leaves. That's Turbo, my dog. Here we are harvesting a crop of Italian ryegrass, red clover, white clover. That stuff was probably 3 feet tall. Really super nice. Made great baleage. Another picture of my cows harvesting the crop. So here you can see we've got a wide variety of, grass that has heads on it. You got some clovers down in there, a few forbs, and by the looks on the cows' faces, they're taking great big bites. Their mouths are full. When it's hanging out the side, that's really important because a cow only takes so many bites per day. And so you want to make sure that every bite, they get a full bite. And the last, is this the last photo? I can't remember. I think this is the one my son took where he just wanted to say it's kind of the end of the night, so it's the sunset. Which, if you ask Joe where I live, there's probably more rainbows than any place in the world.
Yep, beautiful spot. Always enjoyed coming down there. So one of the questions that always comes up when we talk about feeding these brassicas and so forth is the ability of the animals to actually pull those roots up, eat the root crop. So what's your experience been with that?
So it's like a trained experience. Certain cows were capable of pulling the bulbs out and eating those. My veterinarian who's been around the world says in some parts of the world they actually plow those up, and when it gets cold, let the cows go out there and eat them off of the top of the dirt. Some people harvest them, like we'll actually go out and plow them and put them on a skid and save them for winter. So yeah, the bulbs are really good. The one thing is about the brassicas, they also sequester sulfur out of the environment, and they are what is the word? Fumigatable, so they actually discourage nematodes.
Okay, so other questions for Maynard? I know that Renee wants to show a little bit of resource material from the Conservation District. And again, I'll make sure that Renee has a copy of the soil test interpretation bulletin so that can go out to everybody.
Yes, I'm definitely going to send out a packet to everyone after this.
Okay, back to you, Renee.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a kind of a overview of all the services that the Conservation District provides. We, first of all, are non-regulatory, so just want to make sure that you know that we're here to give you information, to give you assistance, to put you in touch with whoever it is that can give you assistance. And if you're doing things that you shouldn't be, we'll let you know, because oftentimes people don't know what they should and shouldn't be doing on their land. But we're definitely not going to turn you in if you don't change your ways. But we definitely are still doing farm visits, farm planning, workshops and presentations like this. We do have cost share assistance when available, and we have a first 5 free soil testing program. And like we discussed earlier, we have equipment that we loan out and some that we rent out. So all that is available on our website at piercecd.org. So this is my team. We kind of break up the county in different areas, and Nicole covers the White River and Puyallup watersheds. I cover the Nisqually watershed. Paul Bourne's out on the Gig Harbor Key Peninsula area, and Allie Nichols is our crop farm specialist, so she works all over the county. So we do have a cover crop workshop out in the field coming up with WSU Extension here in April. We don't have the date set for that yet, but Maynard talks about different cover crops. So just wanted to let you know that that one's coming up, and we have several other classes coming up this spring. So that's available on our website. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Renee.
And thanks so much, Maynard, and for everybody else for joining us tonight. If you have any follow-up questions, just email them to me, and I will pass those on to Maynard and Joe if I can't answer them myself. All right. Well, have a nice evening, everybody.
All right.
for your
Thanks,
time.
everyone.